Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis, second line from the top. We learned in the Mishnah that Rab Meir holds that if a person had an Eruv and it's a suffix of whether it was intact on the onset of Shabbos, with the suffix whether it rolled beyond the Tchum or not, whether it was destroyed or not, whether the Tchum became Tomei or not, suffix Eruv he holds, you have to be Machmer. We're Machmer. So, frankly, the Gemara of Esav Ramer Sveika Lechumra, does Ramer hold that Sveika Lechumra? Vatanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Tomei Sheyorad Litbol, someone who's Tomei. He went into a mikveh to be Tovel, Sovik Tovel, Sovik Light Tovel. It's a Sovik whether he immersed himself completely in the mikveh or not, whether he had a kosher tefillah or not. Va'afilu Tovel, and if he was Tovel, Sovik Tovel Barboim Saw, Sovik Light Tovel Barboim Saw. It's a Sovik whether he was Tovel in a kosher mikveh, whether it had the requisite amount of water, if it had 40 saw or not. The Chain Shnei Mikvois of the two Mikvois. Ba'achas Yesh Mem Barboim Saw. One of the mikvois were kosher. It had 40 saw, ba'achas ein bo arboim saw, and the other one did not have 40 saw. V'toval ba'achas mehem, and he was tovel in one of the mikvois. Ve'no yedea be'ez mehem tovel, and he doesn't know which one or not, so he doesn't know if he had a kosher tefillah. Seika tomei. The suffix is tum. The suffix we say suffix is tum. B'met dvarim amurim b'tum chamur. When do we say that we're machmir, that suffix tefillah, we're machmir, and we say he's tomei, that's in a tuma deraisa, if he was tomei mideraisa. Aval tuma betuma kala, if he was tomei tuma derabanan. Kigain, what's the case of tuma derabanan? Kigain she'achol oichlin tmeim. A person is not tomei, it's not mekabel tuma unless it's from an avatuma. The Rabbanan were geyser several cases that we learned in Masechet Shabbos, Yirches Dover, where they were geyser tumah d'Rabbanan. One of the cases is that if a person ate oichlim foods which are tamei, the Rabbanan were geyser on him a tumah d'Rabbanan. Shas mashkim tmeim, or he drank liquids which were tamei. Baba reish v'ruba mayim shuvim, and he immersed had most of his body in drawn water. Or it fell on his head 3 lugim of mayim shuvim, which are drawn water, which are not kosher for a mikvah. Drawn water that it's not natural water, it's not spring water, it's not from the rainfall. V'yorad litbol, and the case where a person was tomei tumid rabban v'yorad litbol, then in that case we say savik tavel, savik like tavel, va'afilu tavel, savik tavel barboim saw, savik like tavel barboim saw. In the case of tumid rabban, where we had the similar sveikas as we had before, that he wanted to be toivel, it's a suffix where he completely immersed himself or not, or it's a suffix where the mikveh was kosher or not. V'chein shnei mikvois ba'achas yesh behem yesh bo arboim saw, or ba'achas ein bo arboim saw. There were 2 mikvois, one was kosher, one was not. One had 40 saw, one did not. V'tovel ba'achas behem ve'ino yidei be'ez mehem tovel, and he doesn't know which one. Sveika tohar. But Rabbi Yossi Matame. Rabbi Yossi is Matame. So what do we see over here? We have a Stam Mishnah. Stam Mishnah is Ramer. And Ramer holds, when it's a case of a Daraisa, we say Sofik is Tomei. If it's a Tuma Darabanan, we say Sofik Tor. Now in our Mishnah, Ramer is Machmer. He says Sofik Erev is Tomei. It seems to be a stira, Ramer and Ramer. Now it also is a stira of Yossi, which the Gemara will deal with on the next Amud. But right now we're dealing with the stira, the apparent stira in Ramer. Ramer in our Mishnah says we're machmer sofik lechumra, and we see over here by the case of tuma, if it's a case of tuma deraisa, then we say that we're machmer. But tuma derabanan, we're mekel. Gemara answers because of Ramer tchum deraisa nino. Ramer holds that tchumim is a deraisa. That reason why we're machmer in our Mishnah, because he holds tchumim is deraisa. The Gemara of Esav Ramer tchum deraisa, is it so? The Ramer holds that tchumim is a deraisa. Vatanan, we learned in a Mishnah, im eina yochal lahav liyoi, if he can't span the distance. So if we measure the tchum, there's 2,000 amas. We measure with a standard rope at 50 amas. That's how they measured it. So one person stood at one end, another at the other end, and they stretched the rope, and they measured with 50 amma increments. Now let's say they came to a valley. So we say we don't measure the entire incline of the valley and measure the distance down, across, and up. If the valley can be spanned with a 50 amma rope, so one person stands at one end and the other person at the other end, and they pass over the valley. They don't measure the incline of the valley. And similarly, if there's a mountain, they don't measure the incline of the mountain and measure up the mound and up and down. They don't measure the whole area. They say, in this case, we say that you're mavliyat, and you span it. You span the distance across it. So you hold the rope at one end of the mountain, above the height of the mountain, the other person on the other end of the mountain, and you cross over it. Just like in the valley, you cross over the valley. You don't measure the incline. Here also, you don't measure the mountain, the incline of the mountain, or the slope of the mountain. You go above it and measure it above. Now, however, let's say that you can't span it. Let's say the width of the mountain is more than 50 ammas, or the width of the valley is more than 50 ammas. So we say, he said, "Bezu Amar Rav Daisa bar Rav Yomi Mishum Rav Meir Shamati Shemekadrin Baharim." In this case, this is what I heard, that you Mekadrin Baharim literally means that you say that you pierce the mountain, that you, so to speak, go through the mountain. So we'll see later on in the Masechta exactly how it's done. They measure it. You have to measure the incline of the valley. You have to measure the height of the mountain, but you do it without taking the entire distance. They do it with a measurements of 4 ammas, a rope of 4 ammas. When one person holds it by his chest and the other person holds it by his foot, and in that way you minimize the incline, you minimize the height of the mountain. We'll get the details of that later on in the Masechta. But I'll call upon him. What do we see over here? That we see over here that he say that in case of the Tchumim, we rely on this Mekadrin. We rely on this piercing of the mountain, which is a kula. We'll see on Daf Nun Ches exactly how this works. But this is a kula. So by Tchumim, we're making. Now, V'isal Gedayach Tchum Daraisa Mi Mekadrin, if you would hold it, Tchum is the rice, would we rely on this? V'amar of Nachman, Amar of Baravua, Ein Mekadrin, Loi Ba'ari Miklat, Loi Be'egla Rufa, Ibnei Shein Shel Taira. Well, we have other cases of measuring. We measured our miklat, the 2,000 ammas outside the Ir Miklat, which is also considered to be part of the Ir Miklat, which is also saves the person who is running away, the Hayreg, the Ritzach, B'Shaygeg. It's also a sanctuary for him. It also is considered part of the city. And we also measure by Egla Rufa to find out which city was the closest city to where they found the dead body. But over there, we don't rely on Mekadrin. Those are derisas. We don't rely on Mekadrin. So apparently, Rameir does not hold Tchumin's derisa because he says we do rely on Mekadrin for Tchumin, but not in the cases where it's derisa. So it seems to be a kash, where it's like kash. Hadidei haderabe. Where do we say that in our Mishnah he says that we're machmir, Tchumar derisa, suffix is lechumra? That's Rameir's own shita. He holds that Tchum is deraisa. But what we said over there, Mekadrim by the Tchumim, that Rameir said in the name of his Rebbe, who holds that Tchum is the Rabban. But that's not his own shita. He holds Tchum deraisa. It's Medui because it says, Bezu Amar Rabbi Desai, Rav Yana Mishum Rav Meir, Shamati Shemekadrim Bahar, Mishmamino. So it says, Bezu Amar Rabbi Desai Mishum Rav Meir, that he says, Shamati Bezu Amar Rav Desai Rav Yana Mishum Rav Meir, Shamati Shemekadrim Baharim. I heard, Rav Meir says, I heard Shemekadrim Rab. There the Mekadrim Rav Meir, it's not his own sheet. He said, Shamati, he heard from his Rebbeim that Mekadrim Baharim. They hold it's the Rabban. But Rameir's own sheet, which is our Mishnah, he holds that Tchumim is a deraisa. And that's why Safek is Frank the Gemara of Rami deraisa Rameir. Well, we can ask a kasha in Dine deraisa, according to Rameir, steer Rameir and Dine deraisa. This non we learn Naga Becha B'Layla. If a person touched someone at the night during the night, Ve'ino Yodei Im Chai Im Meis, he doesn't know if the person was alive or not, or he was dead. So he doesn't know, therefore, whether he touched a live person or a mez, and did he become Tomei or not? Ulamacha Hishkim Utzol Meis. In the morning he woke up and he found him to be that he was mez. Rav Meir Matayr. Rav Meir says he's Tor. V'chachomim Metamim. And the Chum say it's Tomei. The Chum say the Tomei should call it mez b'shas b'tziolson, because they say you have to treat it at the time when you found it. You found the person at the time you found he was mez, you have to assume that he died earlier, and therefore the person's Tomei. Now here we're dealing with a deraisa, and therefore we're dealing with deraisa. Nevertheless, Rameir says it's Tor. He said the person had a chazaka that he was Tor. He doesn't know if he touched a mess or not. We leave him on the chazaka in his initial status, which he was Tor, and we treat him as being Tor. So it's a case of deraisa, and we say sofek, and we're making. And here by error, even if you hold whom is a deraisa, why over here we machmer? Omer Yirmiyah says Mishnah Seinu Sha'ila Asher. It's called Ben Shmashas. Mishnah says we're talking where the Tuma, the case of the Truma, which became Tomei, and therefore the Erev is not a valid Erev because it's not something that you can eat. It's also Ba'achila. It's not a Safek. It was Tomei, the Sheretz, which was Matama, the dead Sheretz, the creeping, the crawling insect, which was Matama, was there the entire Bein Hashmashos, so it's not even a Safek. How can you say that? How can Rav Yosef therefore say it's a Sofek and it's Tor? It's not a Sofek. If it was the Sheretz or Kol Ben Hashmashos, it's a Vare that it's Tomei. So the Gemara explains as follows. Rabbi Rav Yosef Damar Tavayu. What are we talking in the case of the Mishnah? We're talking where there are two sets of Edom. There are two sets of Edom, witnesses, and they contradict each other. They say each other. One group, one pair says that it became Tomei mibayim. So therefore, on the onset of Shabbos, it wasn't valid. It's not a kosher Erev. The other one says it became only after dark, and therefore, on the onset of Shabbos, it was mutar b'achila, and it's a kosher Erev. So we have two groups of Edom that contradict each other. The two groups of Edom contradict each other, and therefore that's the basis of the machlekes. The Rashba explains the machlekes as follows. When we have two sets of Edom, two sets of witnesses that contradict each other, how do we view this? How do we look at it? Do we look at it as if nothing happened? You have one group, one pair, and another pair, so they contradict each other, they cancel each other out. So therefore it's as if nothing happened. And therefore, the chazaka, the status that you had prior, remains. Or do we say, no, they don't erase each other, we don't cancel each other out. So if you have two Edom that made a claim, and two Edom have the authority, in the Torah, you rely on two Edom. So we can't simply erase it and cancel it out. Now, there's a machlekes that we say that trey is sveika deraisa or sveika derabbanan. So, do we say that min ha-Torah really we cancel it out, nothing happened, but Rabbanan were machner? Or do we say no, that midaraisa we can't cancel it out, and you have to be concerned about the testimony of each of the pair of the Edom. So that Rab Meir holds that trey is fake deraisa. Therefore, what we're talking in our Mishnah, one pair of Edom said that it became Tomei mibayim. Another pair said it became Tomei chashechet. It's a sofek d'oraisa if it's a kosher Erev or not. Therefore, Rab Meir in our Mishnah holds, therefore, the Erev is not valid. The case of the Tumah by touching of the mess, we're not talking about a case of trey, and therefore, we can say we don't know what the status is. We leave the person on his chazaka. So Rameir holds that even by a sveika deraisa, you rely on a chazaka. But in our case, you can't rely on the chazaka because he holds that trey is a sveika deraisa. You can't rely on the chazaka. And in our Mishnah, that's what we're dealing with. So you can't disregard the two Edom that said the Erev's not an Erev. Rav Yossi holds that trey is sveika derabbanan. And the Gabi Eruv were Mekel, and therefore we can be Mekel over here. Rav Omar, he gives a different teretz. He says, Hasam trei chazaka lekula, hachachar chazaka lekula. He says, in the case by the person touching the mace, there's two chazakas. So even if it would be tray or tray, but you have two chazakas. So Rashi says, even if it would be tray or tray, you have two chazakas. You have the chazaka of the person who touched the mace. He had a chazaka that he was tor. And you had a chazaka on the mass. He was alive at the beginning of the night. He was alive. He died at some point. He died. So you have his chazaka that he was alive. So you put him on his chazaka and say he was alive until the point where we know he died. And you have the chazaka of the person who touched him, that he was tahor, and therefore we put him on the chazaka and say he's Torah until the point where we know that he was Tomei. So therefore, with two chazakas, you can be Mekel, you put it on the chazaka, even can I get tray or tray. But in our Mishnah, you only have one chazaka. That's the status of the Truma. Was it Tomei or not? So therefore, if it's only one chazaka, the tray or tray is fake the rice. You can't rely on the chazaka, and therefore Omer in our Mishnah says that the Erev is not valid.